Welcome. The League of Women Voters, ABC, that's Anoka, Blaine, Coon Rapids area, is pleased to present this forum tonight for the Connexus Energy Board of Directors candidates. I'm Jerry Nelson, and I'm the Voter Service Co-Chair for the League of Women Voters, ABC. The League of Women Voters has had a long-standing history of conducting fair, informative, and nonpartisan forums to educate the public on a variety of issues. As with all league forums, this event is being held independent of any candidate or advocacy group and will be conducted as such. While Connexus Energy is a business, it is a business for which 130,000 member owners have no other option for their energy supply. As a nonprofit electric cooperative, that is not regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. The public interest is represented only by directly through the democratic process of electing its board of directors. That democratic process is not being well served when voter turnout is low, such as the 6% of Connexus members who voted in 2014 and 8% in 2015. Our goal here tonight is to increase awareness of the upcoming election and the role of not-for-profit electric cooperatives. The Connexus Energy Board of Directors is responsible for Connexus Energy's mission fulfillment, financial oversight, legislative policy questions, legal and ethical accountability, strategic vision, and operational oversight. Connexus Energy serves customers in Isanti, Chisago, Sherburne, Anoka, Ramsey, Hennepin, and Washington counties. Each Connexus member, no matter where in the service territory they live, is entitled to 2 votes for Board of Directors candidates. One for each of the districts in which there is an election. Ballots should be in your mailbox before the end of March, and members may vote by mail, email, or at the annual meeting, membership meeting, which will be held on April 12th. Information about the candidates will be with the ballot mailing. This year, elections are being held for seats in District 2, currently served by the board chairman, Peter Wojciechowski, and in District 4, currently served by Kenneth Furyk. The Connexus Energy Nominating Committee has additionally nominated Paul Munier as a candidate in District 2 and Brad Blue in District 4. Additionally, along with the information that will be with your ballot, Connexus Energy has invited member owners to an open house to meet their board of directors candidates on Tuesday, March 29th from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. at their Ramsey office at 14601 Ramsey Boulevard. We encourage you to attend that as well. The incumbent directors, Peter Wojciechowski and Kenneth Furyk, declined our invitation to appear at this forum tonight. Paul Munier and Brad Blue are present so that you can hear from them why they are running and what their qualifications are. Since Connexus Energy members may have limited knowledge of the electric cooperative model, we have invited Dwayne Ninneman to give us some background. Dwayne Ninneman is the executive director of Clean Up the River Environment, better known as CURE, a Minnesota grassroots nonprofit focused on promoting sustainability in the areas of energy, water, and climate. Before becoming CURE's executive director, he led CURE's Climate and Energy Program. In recent years, Dwayne has lectured on college campuses about co-op history and the cooperative enterprise business model. Currently, he leads an effort to open up conversations between rural electric cooperatives, boards and managers, and the member owners that they serve. He believes that rural electric co-ops can lead the way into a new era of secure, affordable, and sustainable energy development with the engagement of member owners. Dwayne's life away from Cure is tied to his farm and family in Big Stone County, Minnesota, where he is a member owner of the AgriLight Electric Cooperative. Dwayne, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction about the different ways that electricity is delivered in the United States, a few facts about national statistics on rural electric cooperatives, a few statistics on Minnesota cooperatives, and then why having a forum like this is important. The sale of electricity in the United States is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. The sale of electricity constitutes 2% of our gross domestic product. In the U.S., electricity is divided between investor-owned utilities like Xcel Energy, or IOUs, which in Minnesota are regulated monopolies, and public power entities, which are made up of rural electric cooperatives and municipal electric utilities. Connexus is a rural electric cooperative, even though it's not very rural these days anymore. I understand that Elk River is and will soon be a full-fledged municipal utility. So nationally, public power is represented by 900 cooperative entities, and there are about 2,200 municipal utilities across the country. Rural electric cooperatives were created in 1935 by Franklin Delano Roosevelt signing the Rural Electrification Act. They were created because the investor-owned utilities that had been around for a few decades weren't interested in making the investment to electrify rural places across the country. In Minnesota, I don't know if it's exactly accurate, but we claim to have the first rural electric cooperative, Stony Run Power and Light, that was created in 1914, more than 20 years ahead of the Rural Electrification Act, in Yellow Medicine County, where farmers got together, put up their own poles, strung their lines, and bought power from the new dam that had been created in Granite Falls. In Minnesota, we played another role in the creation of the Rural Electrification Act by having, with cooperation of Northern States Power, modeling how a cooperative could work near Red Wing, Minnesota. And it was that largely led to the success of Congress passing the act. Nationally today, the 900 cooperative entities across the country that cover about 75% of all of the U.S. geographic area are made up of 840 distribution co-ops, of which Connexus is one. It is the largest co-op, electric co-op in Minnesota, and one of the largest in the country. Then there are additionally 65 generation and transmission cooperatives. The things that we refer to as G&Ts are owned by the individual distribution cooperatives around the country. And they are responsible for transmission service and generally the generation of power, about 95% of it on average for all of the rural electric cooperatives like Connexus. In the United States, there are 18.5 million businesses and homes that are served by cooperatives, and cooperatives exist in 2,500 of the U.S.'s 3,100 counties. So it's an important purveyor of electricity. It's 12% of the nation's meters are served by cooperatives. They own assets of $140 billion. They maintain 2.5 million miles, or 42% of all the distribution lines in the country. They deliver 11% of all the total kilowatt hours in the country. They generate about 5% of the total electricity produced in the U.S. They employ 70,000 people. Last year, they retired over $600 million in capital credits. Capital credits are what co-ops give back to their member owners over the period of time that you're a member owner, or in some cases, co-ops will deliver it when you retire. Nationally, co-ops pay $1.4 billion in state and local taxes. In the U.S., or in Minnesota, cooperatives in Minnesota, of which there are 45 total distribution co-ops, employ over 5,000 people. They have over 800,000 customer meters, but they serve 1.8 million of Minnesota's residents. The median-sized co-op is about 6,500 members. The co-op that I'm in is about 5,000. They range in size from as small as 2,000 to Connexus being the largest, and I think currently about 127,000 meters. Co-ops serve 85% of the geographic area in Minnesota. They supply 14.7 billion kilowatt hours per year, $1.5 billion in revenue. They operate by far the largest distribution network for electricity by far, with 121,000 miles of electric distribution lines, compared to Xcel Energy's 28,000 miles of distribution. In most cases, one of the challenges that rural electric co-ops have is the number of people that they serve per mile. The density is very low, only about 6 customers per mile. That's not a problem in the Connexus territory. Everybody's bunched together pretty well. So, the reason this is so important tonight is because of 2 things, I think, in my mind anyway. One is that because co-ops aren't regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, the only way that the member owners really have a say or in anything the co-op does, including making sure that the rates are where they're at and that power is both safe, affordable, and reliable, is through this process. Co-ops abide by the cooperative principles. One of those principles is that there be democratic control of the cooperative in order for the process to work. So probably 3 decades ago, in Minnesota, we decided to exempt rural electric co-ops from oversight by the PUC. That's not the same across the country, but that's the way it works in Minnesota. And the rationale was, well, if the member owners are paying attention, they will make sure that things are done well in their co-op. They're the regulators rather than the state. The fact is that the way that electricity is generated and the way it is purveyed or delivered is changing dramatically in this country. And there are entities, investor-owned utilities and some co-ops in the country that are keeping up. And they are looking to the future. They are doing, as they say, skating to where the puck is going to be rather than where the puck is. That's not the case in a lot of cooperatives. I think it's important that the member owners play a role in making sure that their cooperatives themselves are paying attention and looking to the future, because the future is changing very, very quickly. Investor-owned utilities are moving to change their utility business model in order to be viable in the future. Co-ops are going to have to do exactly that. So between participating in the democratic process and making sure that the co-ops are paying attention to where energy is moving into the future are the 2 primary reasons that you need to have good candidates running for the board. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dwayne.
Sure.
I didn't know most of that. Well, that's great. I'm not part of this cooperative. I get my energy from the city of Anoka, so that's why I'm here as the moderator, as a neutral person. Okay, so let's now hear from our 2 Connexus Board of Directors candidates who agreed to come tonight. And we have some questions to ask them, and let's start with Brad Blue. With the first question, what are your reasons for running for the Connexus Energy Board, and what are your qualifications for the job?
Very good. Thank you, Jerry and the League. I certainly appreciate this invitation. The first reason is really tied into what Dwayne was saying, in that this is a cooperative and we own it. And this is incredibly important that we take care of this asset in our community. It's a $270 million economic engine, and we have a vested interest as member owners. Before I became really involved in the co-op, and I've been a co-op member for 13 years, I always thought of myself as a customer until I realized that this is a company that we own. And the fact that it's tied to energy and environment became even more important to me, and hence my candidacy. So I think a couple of things around the co-op principles. One is around this democratic involvement, the people's voice. And when I learned that only 6% of our members voted in 2014, I became concerned that people weren't aware of the fact that we own it and that there are really important mitigating considerations in reference to the future of energy generation and transmission. So I thought to get involved in this effort and to try to engage members in the co-op. So that was my first impetus, was to get people involved. I've been talking with my neighbors, my colleagues. I basically say, we own this. It's the largest co-op in Minnesota, 130,000 members. It's a very large, as I said, economic engine of $270 million. So I think it's critically important. The second reason I'm involved in this is that energy, whether it's generation, transmission, distribution, consumption at the end of the line, is inextricably tied to our environment and the well-being of our environment. Our environment has a pulse. We hunt in Minnesota. We fish in Minnesota. We like to muck about in the trails. And that's critically important for us. And energy, particularly on the generation side, needs to have a mind around the implications of how we generate, how we transmit, et cetera. So those two things for me are really, really critical. In terms of your other question, in terms of my background, I come from the science side, the research side. I've taught in higher ed. I've led a couple of innovative programs for girls in engineering, math, and science. I've always tried to stay on the edge of what I would call disruption, keenly aware that you need to go slowly to go fast sometimes. And I've also been on the regulatory side. My work now with the Department of Education requires us to manage 20 business units. It's highly complex in terms of budgets, boards, accountabilities, and I think that's very apropos to the challenging work of a board for a co-op. So I bring some skill sets to it. I certainly have a learning curve. I think there's a lot of things, as Dwayne intimated, that are coming that we need to consider, be facile in our thinking, collaborative about how we do it, and more importantly, I think we need to engage everyone in the conversation, particularly, quite frankly, the millennials. They have a cause, and they want to take care of one another, and they want to take care of our world. So I think their voice needs to be heard, and we need to reach out to them.
Thank you. Paul Munir, please tell us your reasons for running and your qualifications for the job.
Thank you. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight's forum for the Connexus Board of Directors position. It is very important that people are aware of the votes that they cast, and whether they're voting for me or somebody else. It's good for you for being here in the audience tonight, or if you're watching on home, good for you for doing your homework and making an informed decision on how you vote. So I'm basically running for three things for the Connexus Energy Board. One is, I think, the transparency, communication, and engagement needs a lot of improvement. In terms of transparency, I think there's a lot of things that go on that most members don't know about, including myself. And I think that that's not a good way to run a co-op when we are member-owned and we share the responsibility, the outcomes. Our economic input and vitality depends on decisions made. I also think communication is lacking in terms of communicating in the 21st century. You look at any business model today, communication, you shouldn't have to seek out to find it. It should be at your fingertips. And there's so many easy, affordable ways that we could be better communicating with the members. And the engagement, we had discussion earlier about the low voter turnout, very indicative of the engagement. And I think that if we're going to have a member-owned co-op, then engagement needs to be much better than that for quality decisions that to be made. I've always, in every position I've always held, I've always thought diversity of opinions and multiple inputs gave you better results. And so my idea would be to open up the business endeavor of Connexus to the public. I also am very focused on the renewable energy economy. I don't have to be a rocket scientist to look around and know that the model is changing, that America and around the world is moving more towards renewable sources of energy. And I think Connexus has been dragging their feet on accepting that reality, and I think that affects us as members. I think that affects us in a lot of ways in terms of our rates and in terms of the environment. And I think it's important that we be willing to accept and look at what future business models might look like for the Connexus co-op. And also, I'm a firm believer in, I think that we could lower energy costs. My understanding is, as a co-op and a nonprofit, our rates are pretty considerable to the investor-owned electric companies. So it tells me that decisions aren't being made on the best interest, at least in my opinion, on the members. And so we have to work at lowering those costs. My qualifications include pretty much being involved in the public sector for most of my adult life. I have served on boards ever since I've been done with graduate school, and I've always been passionate about engagement. I'm the former mayor of Ham Lake, and I worked very hard to open up City Hall to the residents of the city, and I think we made some substantial changes that really influenced the way people looked at city government, and I'm very proud of that. And I'll be willing to talk a little bit more, and some of the questions will talk a little bit more about our backgrounds, but again, thank you for hosting the event, and thank you for being here and doing the work to make an informed decision.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, you did a nice segue into the next question, which is to tell us about your background and your community involvement, and we'll start with Paul Munir.
Thank you, Jerry. I've got a master's degree in psychology. I'm a psychologist by profession. I spent the first 17 years of my adult life working with at-risk kids in Anoka-Hennepin School District. But I've always been interested in more of the macro side of things. So I served on the board of directors for an organization, an association that works with kids and programs throughout the state of Minnesota, and been very engaged with that over the years as a board member. Currently, I serve as the executive director of the Youth Intervention Programs Association. We are primarily a statewide association, but we now have been focusing on service and quality, and we have members from around the world. We have members from Africa and Guam, because the internet has changed everything. And we are leveraging that in a way to provide better advocacy services for our young people by utilizing the new economy that's out there. Like I said before in my opening comments, that I am the former mayor. So I have a good understanding of how board of directors work. My philosophy of serving on a board is not that you run the organization. I think that's a fallacy, and I think a lot of people run for public office thinking that they are going to run it, and you really don't. It's an oversight of the staff, and it's to set direction for the board. And I think I'm very good at understanding that balance. I don't have any misconceptions that if I was elected to the Connexus board of directors that I would be in charge. I think that's a mistake and a wrong way to look at it. My job is to be overseeing what is happening, and if things aren't going well and meeting the needs of the members, then you make changes and you adjust to serve the members. I've also been very involved in other boards and other endeavors and communities around the Minnesota area. I've been very active with the Epilepsy Foundation of Minnesota. I have a daughter that suffers from epilepsy and has since she's been 6. Since then, we've been raising funds and awareness for epilepsy, and I've gotten to know Coach Kill very well through that whole endeavor, and we've had a lot of media coverage, and certainly the awareness and the support for Epilepsy Foundation has definitely increased, and I've taken that on as a passion of mine to help raise awareness for that. And also, I do volunteer for nonprofits throughout the whole state. Primarily, my focus is kids and helping them become successful. And so I've done numerous things from sleeping on roofs to living in boats for weeks and things like that to try to raise awareness and support. So when we talk about engagement and communications, I think that's something I'm very skilled at, and I think that's something that I would focus a lot on. And I'll address that a little bit more in our third and final question.
Thank you. Okay, so Brad Blue, will you tell us about your background and your community involvement?
Sure. So I've been very involved in my local community as well as the statewide and national organizations. But I think the earliest involvement that I remember vividly with some pleasure is when my own children were younger. I coached basketball and soccer, lacrosse, hockey, and a robotics team. And then I oversaw the state robotics efforts in terms of trying to bring more youth into technology. And then I started a program, a nonprofit called GEMS, Girls in Engineering, Math, and Science. So we started girls in 4th grade and saw them all the way through high school, and many of them were first-generation college students. And so it's very rewarding now, of course. They're in graduate schools and doing rather well. And then the Cargill Foundation came to us and asked us to start a commensurate program for boys. Boys were falling off the map, they were uninterested in school, they were bored, and so we started Guys in Science and Engineering. And it was loud, it was raucous, as everything was supposed to be. And we had a great time. And it was really there that I learned the importance of good policy, good structure, inclusiveness, and how to build organizational management. Scaffolding to support that type of an infrastructure. And then I became involved in the Timber Framers Guild. I'm a laborer. I'm a member of the American Federation of Teachers. And I became involved in the Timber Framers Guild, and we do guild projects. I'm just a journeyman. I'm not a professional. But we do projects around the country, and of course they're involved in projects around the world. And that's very important. And now I'm the executive director now of the Minnesota Guild. And so we start non-districted public schools that are innovative and disruptive. We're led by, of course, state compliances and good board governance, et cetera. And so I think the most important organization that I've been a member of was led by Dan Loritz at the Civic Caucus, called the Policy Fellowship Program. And it was there that I began to learn the real importance of strategic thinking, inclusiveness around opinion, and how to set strategic directions that influence some policy. And I concur with Paul. There's a fundamental difference between the board governance of a good organization and the operational management. And I think as board members, it's critically important for us to understand the difference of those two and to stay focused on the former.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, our third question is, what 1 or 2 issues do you expect the co-op to be dealing with in the next few years? And how would you address them? We'll start with Brad Blue.
Thank you. Yeah, there are a number of challenges, many of which Dwayne appropriately intimated earlier. And so some of them are small, and some of them are very, very large, right? So I'll start with the larger pieces, right? We, as members of Connexus Energy, are about to lose one of our most important customers. We're about to lose Elk River. They're going to become a muni. That's 10% of our portfolio. This is a significant loss to us as a co-op. And I'm concerned about the disintermediation. That means that organizations, however large or small, it could be a neighborhood, it could be a community like Elk River, it could be a city, could disintermediate and break away from the co-op because of the lack of progress, the lack of technology, the lack of transparency, whatever it might be. And we become very, very fragmented, right? And there's incredible strength in leverage and number, right? So we need to stay healthy and strong, viable as an organization, paying close attention to our members' needs And that's why member engagement is so critical. We don't want to be punitive as a co-op. So around the conversations about renewable energies, we don't want to be punitive in conversations around people who want to establish, for example, a G&T. So the current conversation nationally is something called MUSH. So it's easy to remember, right? It's called MUSH. So military installations, universities, schools, and hospitals, so that's MUSH, they are looking very, very creatively and progressively at how to establish their own generation and distribution as a community, right? So think of the National Sports Center, for example. They might have the resources to become their own G&T. That would have huge implications for our co-op, right? I mean, it's a $1 million customer, right? So we don't want to think rather indifferently about that, right? We want to be very open and transparent and have really hard conversations about what it means to take this kind of energy conversation into the future. So that's sort of at the macro level. At the micro level, I'm very concerned about the work that gets done at Connexus and how it gets done. I don't think that there's a climate and a culture of respect. I think it's toxic, quite frankly. And I'm worried about that at the micro level. I think there are some policies that absolutely need to change. So I'll give you one example. We own this co-op, right? If someone moves out of the area or their business closes or they move address, etc., if monies are owed to that member, to that owner, those monies rightfully belong to them. Yet we have 18,179 members that we owe money to. We owe them $17 million. And we're not finding them. We're not even making an effort to find them. Right? $17 million is a lot of money. In fact, Representative Newton went online, and you can go online to our website called Connexus Future as well. We've posted it today, connexusfuture.org, and see if your name is on that litany. Representative Newton realized his name was on there and that he was entitled to $6,000 in capital credits, right? Now, Representative Newton's not very difficult to find. In fact, well, although he may be these days, the legislature is, in convening. I get that, right? But I've printed up 433 pages of 18,179 individuals, and I'm going to leave this in the foyer for you. Indubitably, your name is probably on here. In fact, I contacted Sean and Rebecca Otto. They're out in Marine. They're Connexus Energy customers, member owners, because there are autos in here. And if you're a Johnson, the probability is even higher, by the way. So I think the culture, it's about our community. We want this to be a very healthy environment in which people want to work. We want to honor that work with living wages and conditions that encourage them to stay, not just as a part of our Connexus member ownership, but also our community. And I also think it's incredibly important that we become transparent about these policies and that we start to engage our members and then begin to care, not for them, but rather for one another. I think that's incredibly important because we own it.
Thank you, Brad. Now, Paul Munir, what one or two issues do you see the co-op dealing with in the next few years, and how would you address them?
Thank you, Jerry. Point of clarification, are we going to have closing statements, or is this the end?
This is it.
Okay. Sorry. Do you want?
Did mine not sound like a closing
No,
statement?
no. It may have very well been.
Because I was done.
Yeah,
Unless I can borrow one of your notes.
yeah, that's right. Well, again, thank you for hosting this event. It's very important that people are aware. I'm going to answer your question with the assumption that I am elected to the board in terms of what the Connexus board will be working on. And one of the things I'd like to lead the charge on is membership engagement. I think that's at the center of everything that we discussed here tonight, is getting the owners to be part of the process. Membership engagement is something I know a little bit about and have worked on most of my adult life. As the executive director of the organization I work for, in the last 2.5 years, we've had 136% growth in our membership, and the people attending our events have grown by 386%. And that's something that we focused on. And we've done that through good communication and transparency. And that's something I would like to bring to the Connexus board, because I think we'll all do better when we are engaged. And the final thing, the two things that I would like to say is Great River Energy has put together what I think is a really forward-thinking model, and it's called the Future Grid Project. And what they are looking for and trying to get, in my mind, my opinion, trying to get the co-ops to understand is that the world has changed around them, and the future is probably right now. And they're trying to, Connexus buys their energy from Great River Energy, and this is fundamental in the longevity and the vibrancy of our co-op, is how are we going to adapt to a changing world? And how do that transitional period where we enter a new realm of an economy reality that is inclusive of renewable energy is not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's a willingness to go forward, and it's a willingness to look into the future and say things are going to be different. And it's not about me, it's not about the board, it's not about the staff, it's about the members. And I think that is a real fundamental shift in how things need to be looked at. And I think that's what I would bring to the board. And so I thank you again for the opportunity. And if you'd like more information, Brad did mention that we do have a website. Brad and I know each other. And we've been working collaboratively to try to help increase the awareness, and it's connexusfuture.org. And you can find more information about us there, and you can also find that list and see if your name is on there, if you're owed money. I looked, unfortunately, my name wasn't on the list, just my luck. So thank you again for hosting this event.
And thank you all for coming, and thank you for coming in the audience tonight, and those of you watching on video on the computer or at the website here at CTN. I remind you that you'll be voting for 2 candidates of the 4, and no matter where you live in the Connexus Energy service area. So look for your ballots in the mail and cast them for the candidates of your choice. Again, I'd like to remind you that the views expressed tonight are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters. And the sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement of any candidate. The League of Women Voters have membership open to all, men and women alike, and we invite you to join us. Visit our website, lwvmn.org, and you can get more information. Thanks so much.